Coming up on Headline Humboldt, Lisa Dugan from the county's McKinleyville Municipal Advisory Committee joins us to talk cityhood for one of the largest communities on the North Coast and why it'll have to wait. Also, what are the chances that a change in leadership politically could hinder long-running and highly touted plans to build a wind power project off the coast of Humboldt County? We'll find out. Coming up now on Headline Humboldt.
There's a considerable amount of emotion, but also a critical lack of information regarding whether or not incorporation is a viable option for the community of McKinleyville.
Incorporation would transform McKinleyville into a distinct political entity with its own city council and its very own mayor. But is it worth it? From the top of Humboldt Hill, this is Headline Humboldt. I'm James Falk. Thanks for joining us. Currently, the county government manages most of McKinleyville's affairs. For example, the sheriff, not city police, provide law enforcement services. County supervisors govern land use.
The grand jury found that some residents in McKinleyville have expressed interest in the subject of incorporating McKinleyville. The report found that the incorporation as a city poses financial and other impacts on the residents of the proposed new city, adjacent communities, and the county as a whole, and without an in-depth initial feasibility analysis conducted by an independent and neutral party, it is needed so residents can know how these impacts will affect them. While the costs of an initial feasibility analysis would be determined by a successful request for proposals process, Humboldt's local agency formation commission, also known as LAFCO, has estimated that it may cost $60,000 or more. The county is facing a budget shortfall of more than $17 million in fiscal year 23-24. And the county is not in a financial position to allocate additional general fund and therefore staff time for this purpose.
I understand that this item came well after the budget process began and is not part of the current year budget. And so it makes a lot of sense to me that there's no money this year. McKinleyville is the third most populous area in Humboldt County. The data that was used for redistricting recently also showed that it's projected to continue to be the largest growing population. That didn't even include information that we know now that has to do with the soon to hopefully be completed town center ordinance, which will allow for greater density in our community. And throughout the town center planning process, the citizenry has expressed to McMack over and over again that it wants to retain its rural character.
The way the community's been designed in McKinleyville is a reflection of its inability to have that self-determination. If the community of McKinleyville was incorporated today, would we be considering unincorporating it? And that's highly unlikely.
Revenue neutrality is one of the difficult parts of incorporation, whereby in incorporating a new city, we can't harm the county. And one of the things that we know has made it difficult for new cities to incorporate is the fact that new cities do not get a share of the vehicle license fees, which all other incorporated cities get. And so there's a lot of talk in the legislature, and again, I'll just put out the pitch here to our legislative representatives that whether it's legislation that just simply allows McKinleyville to be able to get vehicle license fees as part of incorporation, or whether it's a statewide effort, because that's going to be critical to moving forward as well.
County supervisors this week decided to not fund the incorporation feasibility analysis. We'll talk about that decision with the member of the Municipal Advisory Committee after the break.
Calling all campers, I'm Zane. Join me at Camp TV. Feeling crafty? We've got that covered. What about creative? We've got that too. Spot on, don't you think? From super science and amazing arts to music, magic, movement, and more. No matter the weather, we'll explore together. Make your way to Camp TV. I can't wait to see you here.
Sunday morning at 8 on THD.
Welcome, Lisa. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Yeah, you looked good on camera up there, just so you know. Talking about incorporating McKinleyville. Obviously, that's been a question that's been in the ether in Humboldt County for a long time. As you pointed out in your clip there, this is one of the biggest communities in Humboldt County, and it's continuing to grow, and it looks like that's going to be a thing for a while. So let's back up a little bit. The MAC, you call it, or the MMAC?
McMack.
McMack. Can you describe for us what that committee is, how it came to be, and what your role is on it?
Okay, yeah, I can try to get through all of that. So the McMac stands for the McKinleyville Municipal Advisory Committee, and because we are an unincorporated and large area, what the charge is being a connection to the Board of Supervisors, to the community, and being that sounding board and that voice. So we advise the Board of Supervisors on what's important to McKinleyville. We also are there to advise on the Planning Commission too, on not necessarily specific zoning or
approvals
projects.
or whatever, yeah.
Right, but in general. So things that are going to impact the community. So we were established, I believe, in the early 2010s, maybe 2012, but it came out of the McKinleyville Community Plan from 2002.
Okay.
And so that's the genesis of it. And I believe Supervisor Sundberg is the one who actually got it started.
Okay. So now basically it's not, that particular committee is not incorporation centric. It's about
Correct.
all of McKinleyville's issues and sort of functions
Yes.
as a further level of representation, basically.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Now, so what the genesis of this current discussion was that the grand jury made a recommendation to conduct a feasibility study to look into a cityhood for McKinleyville. And then the Board of Supervisors said no, but that wasn't really a surprise, right? Can you explain why, as you did in the clip, it probably wasn't in the cards this year for that to happen?
Right, and I want to back up for a minute because this actually started, the most recent conversation about incorporation started back in the fall of last year when citizens brought a coalition to us, a presentation that showed why incorporation was so difficult, having to do with the funding and the difficulty with the funding with CEQA and the VLF funds that new cities don't get. And so
CEQA, real quick, is the California Environmental Quality Act. So
Yes, it is.
environmental
Thank
rules. Yeah, that's okay.
Thank you. I'm learning way too many acronyms, and
Well,
so I'm
there's
getting
too many.
There are, and so that piques the committee's curiosity. And at that point, the McMac started a subcommittee to start researching incorporation, to explore it, not necessarily to be pro-incorporation, but to see what's it take, because this has come up for decades in the community. It looks like maybe back into the 60s, 1960s even.
Yeah.
So it keeps coming up, and then it dies and comes up again and dies. It's like, well, what do we need to know to either move this forward or to have the answer and have it just to go away? And your question, I'm trying to remember now what your question was.
It wasn't really a surprise why they didn't fund it. Can you
Yeah.
explain sort of what the circumstances were?
So having worked in the county before, I understand a little bit about their budget process and understand that we were well into the budget cycle when the grand jury's recommendation came along. And while it was really great that the grand jury shed light on the work that the McMac is doing, the timing wasn't great. And our response didn't address timing because we felt like that we didn't have any control over the timing
When
piece.
it came up,
Yeah. And so basically, we went in there knowing that this is mid-budget cycle. The county has got, I think, a $17 million deficit. Right. And the timing wouldn't necessarily be good for asking for funds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, so you guys have done a lot of research and taken input from members of the community. What are the biggest hurdles for a community like McKinleyville to become a city? Why is it so hard?
Well, it's quite a process, and a lot of it comes down to funding. It costs a lot of money to become a city, actually.
Yeah.
We would have to have a CEQA analysis, and you did good with those that acronym earlier, environmental analysis.
Yeah.
And there's questions floating as to why, because there's no shovels hitting the ground. And so that's a hurdle there. There would be no more vehicle licensing fees coming to new cities that would be established. So there's a funding deficit there.
Yeah.
And so there's a group afoot called California Unincorporated that's looking into this and looking at how other places around California may become incorporated, may get through these hurdles. To lessen those hurdles.
Now, so when you bring this question to people, what kind of responses are you getting from regular members of the community?
I'm kind of surprised at a lot of different people saying, in a lot of different circles saying, yeah, incorporation, would be a great thing, and here's why. So there seems to be a lot of, as Kevin Jenkins expressed to the committee, there seems to be a lot of emotion to it. but we don't have the data, we don't have the facts, we don't understand whether or not McKinleyville would financially pan out.
Yeah.
Or pencil out, maybe.
What do you, in terms of, kind of lost my train of thought there. Sorry about that. How do you think people of McKinleyville would benefit from becoming a city? I mean, like right now they're the county, they have services from the county, like we pointed out earlier.
Right.
Would there be any measurable difference for folks as McKinleyville residents if it did become a city?
Well, hopefully. I mean, that would probably be the reason why McKinleyville would decide to incorporate,
Yeah.
because we would
Positive
feel like
benefit of some sort.
Exactly, that there would be some benefit. Right now, McKinleyville is pretty underrepresented. We have one person on a board of 5 that looks out for McKinleyville and the rest of his district.
And the rest of Northern Humboldt, Oric and Willow Creek and...
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and we're becoming more and more populous, and it looks like in the future that that's going to continue with all the things that are popping up here in McKinleyville. And so will that continue to be, will we be more of a drain on county service than, you know, what they're able to provide for us in the future when we're growing potentially, you know, quickly.
Yeah.
So there's that. There's the fact that cities have access to different types of funding, state and federal funding that may be more available to the community, things like that.
Now, one of the things that you've been working on as part of the committee is the City Center project, or the McKinleyville Center
Town
project.
Center, yeah.
Town Center. I got to watch my language.
That's all
here.
right. We'll help you with that. You helped me with mine earlier.
But that's not linked necessarily legally with the cityhood, right? Basically, you can go ahead and create the
Right.
sense of a town and
Right.
the identity without necessarily jumping through the legal hoops.
Absolutely, and in fact, we're getting an awful lot of help right now from county planning in going through that process. I think that's been before the McMac for somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 years. I've been on for 2, but it's been going on for about 3, and so that means that we've been pulling a lot of resources from the county with planning and also supportive resources at the clerk of the board, and they've been super helpful, and we've been really draining those resources at the same time. You know.
What are you hoping to accomplish with the Town Center project? What's the scope?
A sense of place for McKinleyville, and we know that McKinleyville is a big piece for Humboldt's RHNA. It's the regional housing requirements that the state has.
Yeah.
And so a lot of
For
housing.
affordable housing.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. A lot of housing is expected to go into McKinleyville. And so to do that in a way that makes sense, that doesn't sprawl out onto all of the beautiful places to retain our rural character, and to have a sense of place where it's dense enough that people can walk and use alternate modes of transportation and feel safe and get to all their needs, you know, the shops that are within walking distance that you can walk to. So a sense of zoning where it's multiple use. So there can be apartment buildings, you know, with small stores on the bottom and a transit hub that would, you know, help ease some of the traffic burden and connect us to other cities. So a sense of place really where there's there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, people automatically think of like the totem pole and stuff. Is that the general location of what you're talking about with this, or?
That's within it, yeah.
Okay.
So the town center itself is, let's see if I can describe this. It's the piece of Central Avenue where there is the Pearson Shopping Center, and then on the east side there is Pearson Park. And then there's Hiller, and it's the south side of Hiller. There's a piece there as well.
Yeah.
So that is the primary area that they're calling the town center, and we're looking at this Q zone that would be the ordinance overlaid on top of it.
A Q zone. I'm not sure what that.
I'm
It's a
not
certain
sure
zoning
exactly.
designation?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. Alphabet soup. I mean, there's
Yes.
nothing we can do about it, folks.
Yeah.
One of the things that strikes me, being from outside of McKinleyville, so I don't have intimate knowledge of this, but it seems like that for a city that's burgeoning, having a sheriff's department serve for law enforcement services is not ideal. It seems like it might be better to have a police department. Do you find that that's a concern that a lot of folks have, or are people mostly satisfied with where things have gone in terms of police services so far?
Safety is always a concern in McKinleyville. I am a moderator for the McKinleyville Community Watch page, and that comes up along with the speed on Central Avenue are safety concerns. You know, there's lots of things that happen, and yeah, it's tough for the sheriff to be in all places all the time, and so that ebbs and flows. Although I think we've had good service from the sheriff, and if we became a city, there would be different iterations of what we might do for a police force. We may continue to contract for services with the sheriff.
So that could even happen even if you were a city.
Exactly,
Yeah, Blue Lake
and
does
exactly
that right
for
now.
a period of time, and then establish our own at some point too. And so that could be one of the things that changes, but that would be very costly. So I see that probably is happening a bit down the road.
Yeah. And besides, I mean, the police issue, you mentioned that money seems like it's the main hurdle, and that's in terms of providing funding for the city future in order to conduct business, but then also the potential hit on the county if McKinleyville was removed from its tax rolls. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, like, is the county dependent upon McKinleyville in an unhealthy way in terms of finances, so that this could get a fair shake? I guess.
And that remains to be seen, really, because we're talking resources provided for that funding, right?
Yeah,
so there would be, if this were to happen, there would be fewer resources that the county would need to expend in McKinleyville.
It'd save money on something.
But potentially, there may be some infrastructure that needs to be paid for a while, and that's that negotiation that would happen between the county and the new city of how much would be paid out to the county. But we would most likely need to look at, okay, what now are the things that the county no longer needs to provide in McKinleyville, and what makes sense? What is equitable exchange of resources and payment for that resource?
Now, I was unaware of the vehicle license fee change, which is, I mean, you got to wonder at what point what people are thinking when they make these changes that are going to hinder something forever into the future, like taking away vehicle license fees from new cities, as if new cities aren't going to need money.
Right, exactly. It has probably slowed down. I mean, there are very few new cities that have formed in California since that legislation went through.
Yeah, and you'd think that would be something that could alarm folks. But, in terms of where the money would come from to fund a city, I mean, and the way it works now within the budget system, a lot of it is sales tax. Is that right?
I think so.
As far as I understand, I think that's the case. And I wonder, would you have any sense of what the hit would be to the county if?
I don't.
That's
I may have seen that.
Figure,
but Cal Poly Humboldt did an initial data survey, and that's a great document. It's out there on the McMax portion of the county website.
Okay.
So people can go in and take a look at that, because they went and looked at like cities and what the funding was needed, and kind of looked at what the sales tax might be, and so they did kind of an initial.
HumboldtGov.org if people want to check that out, right?
Thank you. Yeah. So they did an initial shot. It's nowhere near the initial feasibility study that is needed, but it's some data to help inform the process. Yeah. Now,
what did you think of how the supervisors reacted to the presentation and their thoughts and?
Actually, I was surprised at the positivity.
It seemed like it was rather positive,
Yeah, I believe everybody really gave it a nod. Mike Wilson said that self-determination for McKinleyville could mean a more vibrant McKinleyville, and that floats all boats. Supervisor Madrone has all along been supportive of this is what McKinleyville wants. And I heard that from Supervisor Bone on Tuesday as well. And
so it seems like it's a unanimous sentiment.
It seemed like if money weren't the object, that sure, go right ahead.
That's always the
it's always money.
Always the rub.
But I'm hopeful based on their reaction that this isn't a dead conversation.
What do you think is driving all the growth in McKinleyville? So you live there.
I do. I do live there.
And it's been burgeoning. I mean, Fortuna and McKinleyville have kind of been. They both are growing a lot. What do you think it is about McKinleyville in particular, both in terms of its physical geography and its character, that's exacerbating the growth?
Wide open spaces. Just north of Arcata, so there's been a larger, not just student population, but staff from Humboldt State, now Cal Poly, who
and
live
it's growing, and that's hugely expanding.
And that's going to be expanding, and so therein lies one of the prongs of potential increased future growth.
Sure,
McKinleyville's a nice place. It
Yeah.
really is. I moved from Arcata about 14 years ago, and I was a little nervous about moving from Arcata, and I found that I really liked McKinleyville.
Yeah.
It's a nice place to be. There are other things like the wind project that will need more housing, and with McKinleyville creating a town center and being part of the county's low-income housing solution, I think that as well is going to,
Yeah.
and still space that there's places to build where there are geographically fewer
Yeah.
in the rest
elsewhere.
of Humboldt.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all
Yeah.
infill or not, and then people need to figure out space to actually build the developments that'll provide some relief. What is the Community Services District's role in this, and have they put out a position?
They have, and we have 2 members of the MCSD who sit on the McMac, and so
Okay.
they've been active in it from that perspective.
Sure.
And then they did actually do a response to the grand jury, and it made a lot of sense. It was very logical. Looking at the infrastructure, they felt is going to be really important. What is right now the infrastructure that MCSD has, and what would be needed if we're going to change things. And they're a well-run organization, and so they want to make sure that if this is done, that it's done the right way, studied well.
Yeah.
The financing piece as well as the infrastructure piece is addressed.
Now, your role is kind of as an adjudicator in this. Like, you're gathering information and you're not making the
Right.
decision necessarily. You're just trying to provide all the answers for the people when they want to consider this.
Exactly.
But personally, you have to have an opinion. What do you think would be the best? Are you okay? Are you allowed to say that? I guess. I mean, what do
I
you
don't
think?
know if I'm allowed, but I'm gonna.
Let's see what happens. The floor opens up.
The floor up and drops. Yeah. Okay. No, that's not good. Well, I would like to see some things happen in McKinleyville that will make it more vibrant. I think McKinleyville's already a great place to begin with, or I wouldn't be living there.
Sure.
And I see what's happening with the town center. I'm excited about what's to be there with the preservation of wetlands, with the making a place where people don't want to go elsewhere to go shopping, that it's less of a bedroom community, more of a destination place.
Yeah.
For my kids and my grandkids and everybody else's in the community.
Absolutely.
So I'm excited about those things. And incorporation, I think it's a good time to be talking about it, because we're making all of these plans that are going to increase our community's growth. And don't we want to do that right? Don't we want to do that in a smart way so that we can retain what we love about McKinleyville? And maybe incorporation is a way to do that. Maybe there are other alternative ways that aren't quite as expensive and convoluted, because this is a long, complicated process.
Sure.
So I think I would like to see something happen, whether that's incorporation or we start delving into how do we become the place that we want to become, and how do we create that bright and vibrant future here for businesses, for families. So if incorporation doesn't happen, the McMac may be looking at other avenues, and I don't know what that might be.
Yeah.
But
it's interesting to me. It's like if someone's from a town, you say people ask where you're from, and you're like McKinleyville right away, or Eureka or Arcata, and if you're not from a town really, like you kind of have this loose. But people from McKinleyville are from McKinleyville. To me, there's a cityhood implied just by the nature of what people bring to mind when they think of McKinleyville.
Right.
But that has nothing to do with the legalistics and all the complications.
it's amazing the number of people in McKinleyville who are surprised to learn they don't live in a city.
They don't live in a city.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And it's also another cause for reform, I think, is that this whole LAFCO process, where it becomes so problematic to even consider the question, that seems like it should be an obvious and easy choice for communities on the edge who want to move forward. Why make it so difficult? I don't understand. Maybe it wasn't done on purpose. But.
Yeah, and we don't know the answers. We know that it's expensive and it takes a lot of hoops to jump through.
Yeah.
The good part is that we've had LAFCO participation on our subcommittee to help guide us through understanding, what we need to be thinking about, what comes next. And,
So they're all on board and you guys are moving ahead.
They are. We've got the business community involved. Jesse Miles from the Chamber of Commerce sits in on the meetings too. And so, so there's interested people who are trying to figure this out. We'd really like to take it, what we consider over the line, which would be getting that initial feasibility analysis or study done so that the people in McKinleyville have some information to be able to say, yeah, incorporation is the way we want to go, or no, this really isn't for us.
Yeah. Well, we're out of time,
All
but
right.
come back when this moves forward. If eventually the feasibility study gets done, I'd love to have you back on the show.
All right,
All right.
will do. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We'll be back after this short break.
Friends and supporters of Keat TV, we are calling all who have a passion for public television on the North Coast. Keat is looking for a diverse group of people to join its Community Advisory Board, or CAB. CAB members play an advising role to management and act as Keat's ambassadors within the community. Meetings are held quarterly on Zoom. Go to keat.org, find the link for CAB, and get involved today. We look forward to meeting you.
Hi, I'm Katie, Texas. It is the first Saturday night in Eureka, and that means it's time for Arts Alive. Welcome to Old Town Art Crawl.
Republican presidential debates kick off this upcoming Wednesday. Yay! Traditionally, Republicans are less likely than Democrats to support the development of energy alternatives to oil, natural gas, and coal. In contrast, by 2030, the Biden administration plans to harness enough offshore wind to power 1 million homes. Some local residents wonder, though, if a Republican president would abandon that goal and possibly derail the Humboldt wind energy project.
There's a certain amount of momentum that would be difficult to undo. So you've got right now 5 companies that have bid $750 million for just 5 subareas off of California's coast. On the East Coast, wind turbines are already in the water, so it seems like it's pretty heavily underway. I think it would be very hard to undo.
Last week, the Humboldt Bay Harbor District applied for an up to $250 million grant to build a terminal to support the wind farm. The Lost Coast Outpost reports the district also agreed to hire mostly union workers for that project. The orange slime found last week suspiciously clouding the water off King Salmon Beach has been tested, and it's not toxic. Local and state environmental health officials confirmed that result this week after samples were sent to the North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board's laboratory. The goo was determined to be non-toxic dinoflagellate, otherwise known as Noctiluca. It caused what's commonly called a red tide. The phenomenon appears to have subsided, and county staff has removed most of the warning signs that had been placed on the beach. But people need to remain cautious, especially as summer winds down. Officials are asking that folks keep an eye out for and avoid contact with cyanobacteria. Typically, bacteria like that and the warnings around it come out between late July and early August, coinciding with low water flows and sustained high temperatures in inland areas. So thanks for joining us. Before we go, I want to remind folks that the reception for the new Joan Cattery Fund for Young Artists, which we reported on last week, will be held September 23rd from 4 to 6 p.m. at the Ferndale Art Museum on Main Street. Stay tuned, stay informed.